A billionaire stepped into her diner, but when his wallet fell open, something inside made her heart stop cold. A photograph. Not just any photo, her mother's. A simple, kind black woman who had lived an unremarkable life, raising her daughter alone. She had no connections to wealth or power, nothing that would explain this. So why on earth was her picture tucked inside a white billionaire's wallet? Stay tuned to uncover the shocking truth that turned her world upside down. And hey, let us know in the comments where you're watching from. The late-night shift dragged on in the quiet diner, the faint hum of a flickering neon sign outside the only thing disturbing the silence. Zoe Carter wiped down the counter, exhausted but relieved the night was almost over. Then, the soft jingle of the bell above the door. She looked up, expecting a trucker or maybe a local in need of a caffeine fix. But instead, he walked in. A man, sharply dressed, exuding power. His suit alone probably cost more than her entire year's rent. He moved with effortless confidence, scanning the diner as if he owned every space he stepped into. Without hesitation, he slid into a booth by the window, his gaze locked on the city streets beyond. Zoe approached, pen ready. But he didn't even glance at the menu. Black coffee. His voice was low, controlled, commanding. She nodded, scribbling it down, then brought his drink a few minutes later. He barely acknowledged her. She was used to it, customers treating her like background noise. But then it happened. As he reached for his wallet to pay, something slipped out. A small photograph, fluttering to the floor. Face up. Zoe's breath caught. Her pulse thundered in her ears. She knew that face. The gentle smile. The warm eyes. The woman who had raised her. Her mother. For a moment, she couldn't move, couldn't think. Then, before she could stop herself, she reached down, her fingers trembling as they closed around the picture. "Where did you get this?" Her voice came out hoarse, barely a whisper. The man's head snapped up. Cold blue eyes locked onto hers. For the first time, he really saw her. Zoe turned the photograph toward him, gripping it like a lifeline. "Why do you have a picture of my mother?" Something flickered across his expression. Shock, recognition, gone in an instant. His face smoothed back into unreadable calm. Without a word, he reached out, his fingers brushing against hers as he took the photo. "You must be mistaken," he said coolly, tucking it back into his wallet like it was nothing. Zoe's stomach twisted. Mistaken?
No.
No way. She knew this photo, every crease, every faded line. Her mother had kept an identical one in a small memory box at home. "This isn't a mistake," she shot back, her voice firm now. "I'm not mistaken. Why do you have it?" The man exhaled sharply, adjusting the sleeve of his expensive suit. "I don't owe you an explanation." Then, before she could react, he stood, tossed a crisp $100 bill on the counter, and turned toward the door.
No.
Panic shot through her. He was leaving. If she let him walk out now, she might never get answers. Zoe bolted from behind the counter, nearly knocking over a tray. "Wait." But he didn't stop. He was already heading toward a sleek black car parked at the curb, a driver stepping out to open the door. Her heart pounded. "Please, just tell me how you knew her." For a moment, just a second, he hesitated, his hand resting on the car door. She thought, hoped, prayed he might actually say something. Instead, he turned just enough to meet her gaze. His expression?
Cold.
Detached. Then, in a voice devoid of emotion, he said, "Forget this." And with that, he slid into the car. The door shut. The engine roared to life. And, before she could take another step, the car vanished into the night. Zoe stood frozen on the sidewalk, her breath shaky. A billionaire had just walked into her life and left her with more questions than she could count. Who was he? And why? Why did he have a photograph of her mother? She wasn't letting this go. She needed the truth. That night, sleep never came. She sat hunched over her tiny kitchen table, her laptop open, scouring the internet. She didn't have a name, no business card, no receipt, just his face, his voice, the way he had looked at her like she was an inconvenience. But that photograph changed everything. She searched through lists of wealthy tycoons, real estate moguls, high-powered CEOs. Dozens of names flashed across the screen. None of them matched. Frustration clawed at her. Hours ticked by. And then, she found him. Richard Lawson, CEO of Lawson Global Enterprises. A billionaire real estate magnate with an empire stretching across cities. His name was stamped on luxury developments, high-profile deals. Zoe clicked on his image, her breath catching. It was him. But nothing connected him to her mother. No past relationships, no family ties. No history between them at all. Which meant only one thing. He had erased her. Zoe's hands clenched into fists. He had walked into that diner holding a piece of her mother's past and acted like she never existed. Like Evelyn Carter was nothing.
No.
She wasn't letting this go. She needed answers. And she knew exactly where to start. The next morning, Zoe took the first bus downtown. The towering glass skyscraper of Lawson Global Enterprises loomed over her. She squared her shoulders. She wasn't leaving without the truth. Zoe's fingers curled into fists at her sides. She wanted to believe him, wanted to let those words sink in, but the years of absence, the unanswered questions, they weren't so easy to forget. She shook her head, her voice barely above a whisper. You don't just get to show up now and expect that to fix everything. Richard exhaled, running a hand through his graying hair. I know, he admitted, and I won't insult you by pretending otherwise. But if there's even the smallest chance to make this right, I have to try. Zoe studied him, searching for deception, for an easy excuse to walk away. But all she saw was a man who looked more lost than she had ever expected him to be. I don't know if I can trust you, she admitted. I don't know if I even want to. Richard nodded, accepting the weight of her words. Then let me prove it. The room fell silent again, thick with unspoken emotions. Zoe's fingers brushed the pendant on the desk, the last piece of her mother's secret. She had come here for answers. She had found them. But now, standing face to face with the man who had unknowingly shaped her entire life, she realized she had another choice to make. Walk away. Or take the first step towards something unknown. Her heart pounded as she lifted her chin. Then start talking.